Hi, I'm Miriam Cates, and today on GBN Originals, I want to talk to you about a story that's as shocking as it is revealing. A story that should force us all to reflect on the long shadow cast by the COVID-19 pandemic, not just here in Britain, but right across Europe. 3 German children, 2 8-year-old twins and their 10-year-old brother, were rescued last week from what Spanish police have called a house of horrors in Oviedo, northern Spain. For nearly 4 years, these children were kept locked inside their own home by their own parents, forced to live under extreme self-imposed COVID restrictions long after the rest of the world had moved on. Now let's be clear about the facts. The parents, a 53-year-old German man and a 48-year-old American woman, were arrested and charged with domestic abuse, habitual psychological abuse, and child abandonment. The children were found wearing 3 face masks each, still in nappies, and sleeping in cribs defaced with disturbing drawings. The house was filled with rubbish, animal feces, and unused medicines. Officers described the children as dirty, socially withdrawn, and completely cut off from reality. Though not malnourished, they were in terrible shape. When police finally brought them outside, the children were so overwhelmed by the sensation of grass under their feet that they fell to the ground in amazement. One officer said, "As soon as we got them out, all 3 children began to breathe deeply, as if they'd never been outside before." Neighbours told police that they had never seen the children leave the house or attend school. Food was delivered to the door, and the family was so reclusive that some locals didn't even know children lived there. The parents insisted that officers wear masks before entering and claimed their children were very sick. Investigators believe the parents were suffering from what has been called COVID syndrome, a psychological condition marked by irrational, persistent fear of the virus, even after the threat has largely subsided. This is not simply a case of eccentricity or overcaution. It's a tragic example of how fear, once allowed to take root, can become a prison not just for individuals but for entire families. The children hadn't attended school since 2021. They didn't speak Spanish, and they had to be addressed in English by the officers who rescued them. They were only allowed to use the toilet at set times. They wore nappies the rest of the time and slept in caged cribs. The family's cat was found seriously ill, apparently never taken to a vet for fear of catching COVID. Now, I want to be absolutely clear. The vast majority of parents did their best during the pandemic, often under impossible circumstances. But this case is a chilling reminder of the dangers of letting fear and state messaging override common sense, parental instinct, and basic humanity. Let's remember, Spain lifted its COVID restrictions in March 2022. Yet this family continued living as if it was the spring of 2020. Why? Because the psychological impact of the pandemic and the relentless messaging about danger, risk, and the need for isolation left deep scars on our collective psyche. We saw it in Britain too.
Using the internet without a VPN, a virtual private network, is a bit like taking to the road without car insurance. All it takes is one unlucky moment to cost you a lot of cash. This video's sponsor is Private Internet Access. They are the VPN to help keep you safe. Click the link in the description below to find out why over 30 million people have downloaded PIA to protect themselves online. A virtual private network is an app that hides your IP address and helps keep your data private. When you're browsing the internet at home, you give up a large amount of data to businesses, to shops, and indeed to social media giants too. Hackers have the ability to steal your personal data with ease, including sensitive information such as passwords, keystrokes, and even your personal photos. Private Internet Access helps protect your personal data by encrypting your internet connection to keep your data out of the hands of cyber criminals. And it's not just hackers either to be concerned about. Information can be censored too. When Canada passed their C-18 bill, social media giants decided to ban news content on their platforms. But PIA can protect your ability to consume the news and content you love. Private Internet Access is available for Windows users, Mac OS, Android, Linux, iOS, and you can use one PIA subscription to protect an unlimited amount of devices. And we've got a huge GB News discount for you too. Click the link in this video's description and you'll get a massive 83% off PIA. That's under £2 a month, the price of a coffee, and you'll get an extra 4 months completely free on top. Also, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee too. Visit piavpn.com/GB News to start protecting yourself digitally today.
I campaigned in Parliament to reopen schools as soon as possible because, as a mother and a former teacher, the catastrophic impact that prolonged isolation would have on children's mental health, their education and their development was just overwhelming. I warned that the long-term costs of lockdowns would be paid by our young people for years and years to come. So it's right to ask, how can this happen in a modern European country? Where were the safeguarding checks? Why did it take so long for authorities to intervene? The answer, in part, is that the pandemic disrupted not just our routines, but our systems of accountability. When schools closed, when social workers couldn't visit homes, when neighbours were told to keep their distance, vulnerable children disappeared from view. In this case, it was only after a neighbour reported that the children hadn't been seen going to school that police acted. This isn't just a Spanish problem. In Britain too, we saw a surge in cases of neglect and abuse going undetected during lockdown. We must never again allow a situation where the most vulnerable are hidden behind closed doors, out of sight and out of mind. What happened in Oviedo is an extreme case, but it should serve as a warning. When fear becomes the dominant emotion in society, when we allow it to override reason, compassion and the rights of children, terrible things can happen. COVID anxiety syndrome is real. It's been described by mental health professionals as a condition where people continue to experience intense fear and anxiety about COVID-19, even when the immediate threat has passed. It leads to compulsive behaviours, excessive cleaning, avoidance of public spaces, and in rare cases, total withdrawal from society. We need to talk honestly about the role of media, government, and public health messaging in fueling this fear. Of course, in the early days of the pandemic, caution was seen as necessary. But as the science evolved, as vaccines became available, and as the risks clearly changed, the messaging too often lagged behind the reality. As a society, we must learn to balance legitimate public health concerns with the need to protect our freedoms, our mental health, and above all, our children. The lesson of the Oviedo House of Horrors is not that all restrictions were necessarily wrong, but that unchecked fear and a loss of perspective can do lasting harm. We need robust systems to safeguard children even in a crisis. We need to support parents, not just with information about risks, but with reassurance and practical help. And we need to ensure that we never again allow fear to become the organising principle of our society. So how do we do that? Well, schools, social services and local authorities must have the resources and the mandate to check on vulnerable children even during emergencies. Public health communication must be based on evidence, proportionate and mindful of the psychological impact on families. We need to invest in support services for people suffering from pandemic anxiety and trauma. Parents need to be partners, not just subjects in decisions about their children's welfare. This story is a tragedy, but it's also a call to action. As a mother, a former MP and now a GB News presenter, I will continue to speak up for children, for families and for common sense. We must never forget the lessons of the pandemic, not just about the virus, but the dangers of fear, isolation and the loss of perspective. Let's make sure that as we move forward, we do so with courage, compassion and a renewed commitment to the well-being of our children. We owe them nothing less. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the GB News YouTube channel.